because you go from being the expert, the go-to, to I was like, how do I turn on my computer? It was like a cliff, right? You see those people every day to not at all. And it was very jarring. The biggest surprise was actually grief.
Andrea, welcome to the Made Leader podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thanks for having me.
And for the listeners, do you mind giving giving the audience an introduction of yourself?
Sure. So I am Andrea Herron. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for AAA of Oregon, Idaho, and also author of There's an Elephant in Your Office, which is kind of a leader or manager's guide to managing mental health in the workplace.
Yes, which is a past podcast we talked about is how do you
Yes.
mental health as a leader. So I like to get started with this question about the biggest lie we tell people about leadership. And what do you think that is, Andrea?
It's a great question and maybe a controversial answer.
Yeah, let's go.
But I think the biggest lie we tell is that anyone can be a leader if they're successful in whatever their particular skilled area is. In my opinion, not everyone can or should be a leader. Someone will often excel in their job, and then somehow we determine that translates into leading a group of people, which is a completely different skill set. So I think we need our subject matter experts and managers. Sometimes that's the same person, and sometimes it's not.
Yes, I love that. So not everyone can, right? So I think it's, I subscribe to the stat. I found the stat, and I think maybe it made me feel better, like about my own struggle with leadership and how hard it was for me. But the Gallup stat of 90% of us don't have these natural skills and abilities to lead. So there's like a solid 10% of us, and I clutch onto that stat. And I'm glad.
I didn't even know that stat, but I love it.
Well, not everyone can, right? And even if they can, it may not come natural to them or need to or want to. So, yes.
Right. There's multiple ways to be successful, and that doesn't always have to include a leadership path.
Great. Let's talk about your career transition, because you just had one about 6 months ago and you jumped industries. So still in HR, but really went from, I guess we'll call it health services. You're in insurance now. You were in health services / tech. What was the first 90 days like learning a new industry? Even though HR, it's different everywhere you go.
Yeah, it definitely was a big industry jump and a steep learning curve, no doubt. But honestly, people are people at the core of it. And there is a lot to learn with any new organization: the jobs, the goals and KPIs, the policies, budget, not to mention the values and culture. But all of those things, in my opinion, transcend industry silos, but it is very much a mental overload. And so I think it was just trying to absorb as much as I could while giving myself a lot of grace and not being hard on myself, because you go from being the expert, the go-to, to I was like, how do I turn on my computer?
Yeah, that is. That's the basics, right? You're starting all over.
Yeah.
I remember I went from healthcare into health insurance. And I remember people talking about PM and all these like different terminologies. And I was like, I just don't understand, because everyone there thinks everyone knows. And you have to be like, wait a minute. Can you explain that to me? And I imagine that's even harder at your level when you're coming in as, an executive.
The acronyms are outrageous. I mean, yes, healthcare and technology, and then currently with AAA of Oregon, Idaho. So we've got roadside insurance, travel agents. Even within the business, there are multiple different industries. And so what was the most confusing to me is the overlap in acronyms between the business and the HR. So they would be saying the same thing. Why are they saying this HR term? But it wasn't at all. So that was a road.
So did you kind of just hang back and wait and see if you could figure it out? And because sometimes it will reveal itself, right? Like it when did you know when to hang back and when to go, "Excuse me, can you just explain that to me, please?"
Right. So I'm trying to hang in there, read the context clues and Google it, on the side. But I will say my executive team, maybe they could see it on my face, or maybe they just realized, and they would often, one of them would be like, "Oh, that means this." I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you." But later I would just, Google privately.
They saw your blank expression, and if you hit it
Uh-huh.
well, you always had Google, right?
Right. I was like, what does this mean?
Well, did anything surprise you? Like, were you surprised by anything moving, either industry-wise, people-wise, culture-wise?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and the biggest surprise was actually grief. I completely underestimated the emotional labor and feelings of loss with the job transition, especially when you're a leader and you're highly integrated into the culture. You become very invested in those relationships. And I mean, there were so many times in those early days where I would turn and I would want to talk to someone who I wasn't working with anymore for insight. And that would make me sad. And then at the same time, you're expending enormous amounts of energy and emotional work trying to build new relationships, learn people, and make a good impression. So they're glad they hired you. I just found it really challenging to sit in that in between. And I did not anticipate how hard that would be.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, some of the friends I still talk to, like, were from my corporate career 9 years ago, right? Like,
Yeah.
that I mean, you form friendships. Did you give yourself any time off between the 2 jobs?
I had a week and I promptly got sick
Ugh.
because
So
I
you did
think my body let out all of that stress. And yeah, I was like, well, I guess I'm not tackling all those projects I wanted to get to in this 1 week off.
It's just interesting that you talked about being surprised by grief, yet, moving on, even if it was of your own accord, right? Is your own decision. It is still like you built those relationships over time. You have your people you turn to and they're not there anymore. And so you can just tell you're an overachiever to say, I have 1 week off between and I'm going to pack it full of to-dos.
Oh, that sounds, yes, I know when I hear it back. But also, I mean, the other piece of that, yes, you do build really strong relationships, but also I'd been there about 8 years, which means the totality of the COVID experience was spent with this group of people. And so I didn't realize how much we had maybe trauma bonded and bonded over all of that and had become very deeply connected. And then to just, even though it's coming, I knew, and we talked about it, we celebrated it. I knew I was going somewhere exciting. You still, it was like a cliff, right? You see those
Mhm.
people every day to not at all. And it was very jarring.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's just something that people don't think about, right? Because you're just thinking about the new horizon, the
Mhm.
exciting things.
I didn't think about it. I mean, you do, but you don't, right? Like it, but
Mhm.
you don't really let yourself think about it, probably because it's
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, just stay busy. If you're me,
Right.
you do, but, how how long did it take you to get through that? Are you still going through that? Are there still times where you're like, "Oh, I kinda miss that person?" Are you still, miss having that person that's established trust? You're doing that now, I'm sure. We'll talk about that in a minute, but are you still
Yeah.
going through it?
I think the acute phase of that was probably the first 30 days where every norm, every habit, just your entire day to day is flipped upside down. And then it gets, a little better as you're starting to build those other relationships. I definitely still miss and think about some of my colleagues, and, we will stay in touch. But I'd say the 30 days were the first really significant chunk, and then it got better
Yeah,
incrementally.
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're talking about all these acronyms you're learning, like the people you're learning. You're trying to build, trust with your team, all right, your colleagues. Like there's all of these different relationships that you're trying to build. So how do you go about building trust
Yeah,
with
I
any
mean,
of
that
those
is
audiences? Start anywhere.
the million-dollar question, right? It's such a critical part of any transition. And I think what I tried to keep in mind is that they are also in the midst of a change, especially your direct reports or your team. They're wondering what you're going to change, what you're going to keep the same, and how it impacts them personally. And so I intentionally prioritized learning each person's individual strengths, their role, their likes, their dislikes, their strengths and ambitions. How do they like to communicate? How much feedback and touch points are they used to receiving? You kind of need that baseline of what have they been getting, and then you can work together to figure out, was that enough, too much, too little, and just really gathering information through curious and genuine questions, not a checklist, because they're also learning your style, and so it needs to be authentic.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like, all right, so what are your strengths? Check.
Yeah,
Could
exactly. Don't do that.
appear that way. I'm sure you weren't doing that. Well, what's the balance between asking them about them, but then also sharing about yourself, right? Because I mean, I'm sure you're not coming in there and go, come, Andrea, here's what I like to do. Here's how we're going to run the show, right? You're not doing that. But there is, there's different views on how much you say, hey, here's who I am. Here's how I like to do business. Here's how I like to lead. How did you balance that? Or did you just say, you'll see how I lead, right? It's more actions than words.
It's a little bit of all of it. I mean, I am a very open communicator, very transparent. I believe that the more my team knows that I know and I know that they know, the better we are. With the asterisks that some things aren't for everyone, right? There's some confidentiality, but generally speaking, I do like very open communication. And one thing that we do that I thought was super helpful is there's some connect cards, and they're just one question. And at the beginning of team meetings, we'll each pick a question and answer it. And you learn just a little bit more about that person. And the questions really range, but it could be anything from, what was your favorite Halloween costume when you were growing up, to, if you could only eat one type of food for the rest of your life, what would it be? So it's nothing serious. It's not even work related, but it's just these little insights that kind of let you slow drip out and learn people a little bit at a time.
Yes. Well, did you bring that to the team, or were they already doing that?
They were already doing it, and I loved it. So I'm like, we're definitely going to keep this going.
Oh, yeah. So you just continue the tradition, and it sounds like it's a
Yeah.
great norm that they've already established.
Well, and the norms, I would say, is the other thing that I did very intentionally, and I would recommend to other people going into a new leadership role, is creating or defining at least operating norms and expectations. And that in itself builds trust and lets people know that you want to be accountable. And so what does that mean, right? What is an operating norm? It's things like, how do people communicate time off? Do you have a shared calendar? Is it a chat? I mean, like, what is the expectation? Working location. Do we have an agreed day in the office? What is our team meeting frequency and style? Do we like chat, email, video, phone? All of these little norms that we take for granted. When you're a new leader coming in, that's the moment to kind of have a real, authentic conversation up front to say, let's all agree to this. And then we're all on the same page. And it just openly builds trust and comfort.
All right, so I'm gonna get a little tactical just in case people are like,
Yeah.
well, how does that actually work? So you
Mhm.
go in and it's like a team meeting and you say, I'd like us to figure out these 4 things today. Or are you saying, hey, let's create some norms? Like, how do you approach it?
I've honestly seen it done both ways, depending on the team. So for some of my tech teams, they are more black and white. And it really is, hey, let's go over what's working. What do you like? Should we continue it? Here, here, here,
Mm.
here. For my team, less black and white, a lot more gray, working in the HR world, which is very helpful competency.
Mhm.
It's more, hey, I see that you all have been having meetings on Wednesdays at this time. Is that Do we like that? Is that because everyone's already here? Because people are visiting different locations, and it's a little bit more organic and more of a check-in, like how's that work? And then more noticing and confirming versus being so direct. So it
Mhm.
really depends on the team, which again, you
Gotcha.
have to learn. So, you're going to make two steps forward, one step back a little bit,
Yeah.
but patience.
Yeah, I mean, I think you explained it well. Just here's what I've observed since being
Mhm.
here, and is this something you want to continue? If not,
Yep.
why not? And help me understand, and we'll either go the path or change
Right.
it a little bit.
Because you can say, I'm not invested in our meeting being this certain date and time. This obviously worked for a reason. When you said it, is that still working?
Mhm.
And it lets people know you're flexible, you're adaptable. It doesn't have to be the way it's always been, but also it can be if
Mhm.
that's working.
Yeah, I like that. Now, one thing that popped up for me when you were talking was the prior leader. I have seen
Mhm.
some leaders have problems with, like, it's still, I work with this team and they still talk about this prior leader that was there like a year ago and how great she was. And it just like, that's not always the case. It's not always, you know, how great they were. But how do you deal with the ghost of the last boss who people may still refer to?
Yeah, I am currently dealing with that, and I I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think that's such a gift to come in and have to fill big shoes, because the previous person did a great job, and so I just always try to keep gratitude front and center. Because I've come into places where it wasn't that way, and you're fighting for the whole reputation of the department. And that's worse than being like, oh, I'm going to have to earn your trust because you really connected with this past leader and you love the way they operated. Great. The bar is high and I plan to meet it. And it kind of gives you some energy to feel like, okay, like we're on a good trajectory. People respect this team. And now I get to continue that. So I just try to keep a really positive and grateful mindset that that's how it is. Now, if I'm being honest, sometimes I'm like, oh, could they just come and tell me what they did? Why were they so successful and what is the secret? But you're going to do it your own way. And so it's very important to try and not fit that box or that mold because they hired you for your skills and personality and competencies, not, someone different than you. So you got to bring yourself and try not to get too distracted by what was.
Yeah, I like your honesty there because, yeah, I mean, like, okay, well, they're gone. I know you didn't say that, but that's what I would be saying in my head. But also, what you said at the beginning was the grief, right? So
Yeah.
they are having that grieving process too. If they had a
Yep.
boss they loved and now they're gone, and they will love you in time, right? But it's just like you said, is like you got to actively earn their trust and show them what kind of leader you're going to be.
And that is so hard to go from being loved. And I mean, the send off was, I cried. It was so sweet from my last position, then to this new one where they're grieving the last person that left. And like, I don't know you. Who are you? What are you going to do here? It's like, but you're going to love me. I promise. Just give me some
Trust me.
time. Or you won't. Right. And that's also
Yeah.
okay. I think. I don't know.
Well, you can't control it, right? It's just
I
one of those
can't.
things, and I was talking to a group of leaders earlier, and they're like, I just realized I'm not gonna make everyone happy," and newsflash, you're not, and it's hard for someone who cares about being a good leader and wants 'cause you want people to think you're a good leader, who doesn't, right?
Right.
But it's out of your control, and you can just do what you can do, and it's hard to separate that.
Yeah.
Let me go on a different tact. Peers. Like, one thing I think new leaders, because they're just so in it and they're so busy and they're just trying to learn the day-to-day of managing, leading in their work, that sometimes they forget that their peers can be their best advocates. And
Mhm.
so what's your approach when you walked into your new job? And how did you get to know and connect with your peers?
I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times we focus on our direct reports and our team, but your peers are your biggest allies. And when I started this role and was thinking how I was going to approach it, it was relationship building is first and foremost the number one priority, top to bottom. Yes, your direct boss, because that's important, and yes, your team that you oversee, but how are you respecting, honoring, learning from, and appreciating your peers? Because again, they just lost someone they're used to working with. They don't know you. So it's the same, right? Rinse, repeat.
Mhm.
But being genuinely interested in their area of the business, asking good questions, listening a whole lot more than you talk in the beginning, and respecting what has been done. I think one mistake I have seen other people make that I'm trying not to is to come in and get really excited because you want to show your value, and you're like, here's all the things we can fix and all the ideas that I have to do this different. And what your peers are going to hear is, oh, you don't think we do a good job here. You think we're doing it wrong. And so acknowledging the positive, wow, this is great. And not to be fake about it, but the things you actually think are working or you're impressed by is really important to share when you're building those relationships from top to bottom, but especially your peers, because you want to respect them, the work they've done, and learn from them, because they're the ones that are going to help you with those unwritten rules about your collective boss. Right? What are the unwritten rules? Do we all sit in a certain place at the meeting at the table? Does the boss like a certain format of an email? How am I going to know when they really care about something versus when it's not that big of a deal? Right? These unspoken things that you're only going to get either from making a lot of mistakes or your peers.
Yes, a nice shortcut, right? If
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. It's
or
a hack.
especially, yes, I think that's brilliant to ask and get to know them, of course, what's going on in your department, how how blah blah blah, all the things. But then I guess after that, then you're like, tell me what's really. How would I know? What our boss
Yeah.
cares about. I think
And they get
that's.
to be the expert, right? They get to fill you in and bring you along. And that feels really good to them because they're
Mhm.
helping you be successful. And so I think it's a really good positive feedback loop if you can try to approach it with that curiosity
Mhm.
and respect and appreciation.
Yes, and also let me just spend a minute because I think a lot of people come in and say, "I'm one of those people. Let's change it all," right? You're not
Yep.
acknowledging all the good work that is done, and I think it's particularly you gotta be cautious of it as an outsider, right? Because then they're just gonna say, "Oh, they don't know. They don't know how we do things here," and it almost, just ostracizes you, and they are doing good work, and no one wants what they call a noob to come in and say, "Look at all the things that they're not doing right," which is how you're not saying it, but that's how they may be interpreting it. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Especially if you're going into a leadership team who's been intact for a long, long time together. There's a reason they're doing everything they're doing. And so if you come in with all these new ideas, they're probably a little bit more resistant to change because they've been together for so long. And look, I'm saying all this like it's easy. This is not easy. It's so hard because you have all these ideas and you're excited and you want to show value and that they hired you for the right reason. But in those first 90 days, just zip those lips and be appreciative and curious. And that is your job.
I love that you said that. That just we it is such a pressure-filled time,
Mhm.
whether that is internal pressure or potentially external pressure that you are coming and you need to do something in the first 90 days.
Yeah.
But you don't need to. It's okay just to observe and say in 90 days, I'll give a recommendation, but I need to sit back and listen because you don't know what you don't know.
Right. And keep a running list. I mean, that is something that helped me because, as we've already determined, I am a high achiever and just sitting and doing nothing was torture, but I was doing something if I was writing it down. So keep a running
Mhm.
list of your observations, your recommendations, what you think you know or would do in the future. And then you can look back 90 days and, laugh at some of the assumptions you had because you just didn't know enough yet. And a few will stick.
Yeah, you could look back at that list and you go, "Oh, I thought that was really important on day 5," but,
Mhm.
day
Right.
50, you're like, "So not important in the grand scheme of things," right?
Right. Yep.
Good tactic. Now, if you look back at your transition, what leadership skill or skills do you think really served you in this transition? And, maybe new leaders may overlook those skills.
I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It really is relationship building. It is your number one priority. So you've got to check your ego, your credentials, your experience, and the way you think it should be done at the door. And that is very humbling, especially because you're like, but I'm a leader. Like, yes. And a good leader comes in and observes and listens and has that servant leadership mindset, in my opinion. And so it's so hard to do, but really trying to get to know people, earning that trust, and learning as much as you can about what's going on and why they're doing it, however they're doing it. Then you'll be more informed and people will actually listen to you because you took the time to hear them in the beginning.
Yeah, and something just clicked for me. Like when you said, you can always ask, "Oh, why are you doing that?" Just be cautious of how you say it. Like, "Why are you doing
Mhm.
that?" Right?
Right.
Or explaining, "Hey, I'm really, really just trying to understand. I'm not trying to, quiz you. I really want to know." So
Mhm.
because you do want to say, "Oh, why are you doing that? I'm curious about that." But it's all like, how some
Yeah.
people can come across.
You are exactly right. And that is so important because people are nervous. And so they're going to read into what you're saying and the questions you're asking. And are they being expected to justify their job?
Mhm.
When really you just literally want to know what they do because you don't know. And
Right.
so taking and being very explicit, like, I am information gathering, I am just super curious, I'm learning, help me understand. Any of those words are good to put in front of why do we do that?
Right, right. I was just walking with my husband, and I said, like, "Oh, why wouldn't you do that?" And I was like, and then I was like, well, let me preface that because I just really don't understand, right? I'm not, but the way I came across first, I was like, yikes, I need to step that back, walk it back a little bit. So, if you were mentoring a new leader over coffee, and they just accepted a new offer, a new role, they're going to go lead at a new organization, what do you think is one thing they should start doing before their first day at this new organization?
Hmm. I think this is the biggest change management exercise that we go through. And so you could look up change management tenets. But what it really is understanding that everything about your day to day, your habits, your routines, your drive, who you talk to, where you walk, when you take that 10-minute walk, going to be different. So start thinking about ways that you can support yourself and, quite frankly, your own mental health because your foundation is going to be shaken, even though you're excited about it. It's a lot of change for people to process, especially, let's not forget that your world is part of the larger world, which is going through some things, right? And so we have to acknowledge that your foundation is going to be shaken. And so, what tools, what people, what habits can you start, write down, get an idea of to take care of your own well being during that time? Because it will really test your self confidence because you're going to feel like an idiot at times. Like I said, I couldn't even turn on my computer. I'm like, well, am I qualified for this job? I don't even know. And so, how are you going to support yourself through that?
Yes, it's humbling. Well,
It
Andrea, is there
is.
anything that you think that they should leave behind, like as they go into a new organization? Is there anything for them to maybe stop or consider stopping doing?
It's going to sound funny, but I think stop thinking that you know what the answer is because you're going to bring your experience. You're like, oh, well, we did this before. And that is probably not going to work in the same way in a new environment with new people at a new place. So that knee jerk reaction, you want to learn the difference between reacting and responding. A huge piece of advice. A reaction is just thought to mouth, right? Just out it goes. But responding is taking 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 5 minutes to figure out, okay, that was an emotional reaction. Like, what is an actual response to that? Which is why we say sleep on it, walk away to that from that email and come back to it later. That's the same idea, but you got to leave behind that knee-jerk reaction and be really thoughtful in how you respond, because you've got a blank canvas. No, again, the positive is that nobody knows you. So you get to be whatever kind of leader you want, but that takes intentionality.
Yes, the old pause before reacting or before
Mhm.
you respond, before you do anything.
So
Ready to
annoying.
first off. No. Well, that's another thing that people sometimes say is what we did at my old place, right? And they come into their new place and like, nobody cares. Like, that's not what we do here.
Right. It informs options, but yeah, it's really easy. Like, oh, we should just do this. That's what we did before and it worked. And then you don't build trust that way.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, Andrea, where can people find out more about you and connect?
LinkedIn is always a great one-stop shop. Also, Sides Consulting Services is my website where I do speaking and book things. Another great place to find my information.
All right, I'll link that up in the show notes. But Andrea, before we sign off today, do you have any additional thoughts or comments or anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I would love to leave people with my favorite mantra, which is slow progress is still progress. It's still progress. Just say it to yourself over and over because you want to, run out the gate, but slow progress is still progress.
I needed that for me today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Great
It's a
advice.
really good one. I really do say it to myself all the time because you want to be at full speed and it's just the little things add up. So give yourself some credit, and slow progress is still progress.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.